All right, guys, so welcome to the first video of a 4-part series where we're going to be discussing everything website related. Now, this video is sponsored by Wix, and if you don't know who Wix is, they are a service who supplies a bunch of different website templates for all sorts of people. We're going to be focusing kind of on videography and photographers since that's what we are. So this is going to be a 4-part series, and in this first video, we're going to talk about what you should name your company and how to go about buying a domain and kind of getting everything started so that you can build your website. The second video is going to be everything that you need in a website, which features, which images, how to make your website usable. The third video is going to be me actually making my own website through the Wix platform. And then the fourth video is going to be, now that you have a website, how do you get clients and traffic to actually find you and go to your site itself? And then also how you might be able to make sales directly from your website.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with this, and we'll talk about what to name your business and then what your domain name should be. Because in many cases, those two things are very related, but at the same time, you might come up with a business name and the domain name may not be available. Somebody may have already purchased it. So before we get into getting the domain name, let's talk about business names in general. And if you happen to be watching this and you're not a photographer, keep in mind that we're going to be coming at this from a photography or videography standpoint.
But the same overall rules apply no matter what you name your business.
Exactly.
So I can kind of start and tell you, I've had many businesses related to photography because I like to drive people to each separate business and have it kind of a niche photography service. So I own PatrickHallWeddings.com, which has been my wedding website for years. And I've always liked that name because it has my name in it, Patrick Hall, and then weddings. With a name like that, it's as obvious as you can make it. You know exactly what you're getting into, and you know you're not going to find anything other than wedding photos on that website.
When I first started, I really wanted to have Robert Lee Morris be my business name. Robert Lee Morris happens to be a famous jewelry designer who already owns that domain.
I see him in New York every time I go.
I know, and he
Soho
makes me
like
mad. He's stolen my name. And so that was never an option. And so I decided to name my business years ago. I mean, this was probably close to 15 years ago.
This is before I met you.
Yeah, R.L. Morris Photography or R.L. Morris Weddings. And so I was actually able to purchase rlmorris.com, R.L. Morris Weddings, and R.L. Morris Photography very easily. Those were available URLs, .coms, obviously. Yep. However,
did you use all three of those names?
I did. rlmorris.com was for my commercial photography. R.L. Morris Weddings was for my wedding photography, and then R.L. Morris Photography might have sent people to this landing page where you could choose either or.
Right.
I don't remember. Obviously, I would have loved leemorris.com. That was not available at the time, although I have recently acquired leemorris.com. We'll talk about that in a second. But one thing that I want to bring up is, should you be naming your business your name, or should you be naming your business some generic name that is a little bit less tied to you individually? What is your opinion of that?
I think it really depends. If you are the director, you're the DP, you're the producer, it's going to be you showing up to the photo shoot. It makes a lot of sense to have your name in your title.
Yes,
because they are hiring you as a person.
Yep.
However, especially in the wedding world, we have known many wedding photographers that have a business where they have other photographers under them, or it's, any number of photographers could show up to shoot your wedding, and so they go with something a lot more general. Their name's not in it at all. Some examples could be like, I'll just make up some names so that I'm not sending anybody to an actual website, but like, I don't know, like Red Bouquet Photography or something, or Seashell Photos, or a little
I can almost guarantee you that is probably a business. I mean, there's some really horrific photography business names like Got the Shot Photography.com, right. or like,
Memories Are Us.
Yeah, just super cheesy stuff. So I would highly suggest staying away from that as well. But there's one thing that I never really considered when I started my business, and I think it's really important, and that is the idea that maybe one day you will want to sell it.
Yeah.
And if it is patrickhall.com, who's going to buy that? I mean,
Yeah.
nobody's going to buy that business. Maybe you could sell the domain name to another Patrick Hall somewhere. But in terms of another wedding photographer buying that, they're not going to want that. They're going to want maybe your cameras. Maybe you could sell that. But if you owned a company called charlestonweddingphotography.com, this is something that I purchased years ago, now that has a lot of inherent value because it's to the top of Google already. Everyone can remember it. People Google it when they're just thinking about weddings in Charleston
That
and
name
photography.
specifically has keywords in it that are very valuable.
Right. And so a huge part of creating a website is getting your website in front of people. How are you going to do that? Are you going to be paying for ads? Are you going to be hitting social media hard and, hoping people follow you natively? Or are you going to play the SEO game, search engine optimization, and hope that you can get to the top of Google natively? That's the best and easiest
So
option.
if you're Blue Bokeh Photography, that might have a catchy name, might have a cool logo, but nobody's typing that in when they're looking for photographers.
Right.
It's less branded than your name, but it doesn't contain the keywords that you would want.
Yeah, so keep all of this in mind. And if you are a wedding photographer, I kind of lean towards going after the market that you are currently in for your business name and domain name. Now, the problem with that is what happens if you want to become a famous photographer that travels around the world. You don't want to be known as charlestonweddingphotography.com. You want to be patrickhall.com.
Well, it's ironic that you mentioned that because my commercial website has probably been down, I now think, for about a year. I really haven't been focusing on commercial photography for the last year or two. And I named my commercial website charlestoncommercialphotographer.com.
Okay.
Now I live in Puerto Rico. Doesn't make any sense to have Charleston in the name. And as you'll see when I build my own website, I have a lot of viral series that all of those posts from all over the world point back to that domain. So it's kind of been a big mistake because I never thought I would leave Charleston.
Right. So there's just a lot to think about here. And maybe the best option is to have your name, if you can get it, and then also buy other domain names as well. You can point those domain names to your personal website, or you could create separate websites with those other domains. For instance, a blog. If you were a wedding photographer, you have a website that's patrickhall.com. That's where all of your portfolio is. But then your blog is charlestonweddingphotography.com. And that is actually where the value is one day if you ever wanted to sell. That's also going to get you to the top of Google. And now you're playing the SEO game in two different ways. You're trying to become a well-known photographer under your own name, and you're also trying to hit the top keywords for your industry so that people searching for photographers are going to find you natively.
Another thing that you just brought up that is kind of interesting is if you want to eventually make the jump from, say, wedding photography to commercial photography, you may not want people to find the photography that you used to do. If you do weddings or if you do families or you do, some kind of portraits or something, dog photography, pet photography, you may not want people to know that that's you if you do this higher level commercial photography, especially if the price range is very different.
Absolutely.
If you're charging a lot less for family portraits than you are for commercial work that you're shooting for Adidas, it might be nice to brand those separately and not have them link up so that your two different client bases aren't discovering the different price ranges.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this when we get into the next chapter of this and we talk about what should be on your website. But yeah, in many cases, if you're specializing in different types of work, they really should be separate websites completely.
All right, so you've come up with the perfect name. The next step is finding out if that name is available.
Right.
And there's a bunch of different websites you can go to buy domains. You can actually go to Wix and buy a domain through the Wix website. I've looked at their subscription service, and if you do one of their subscription services, you actually get one free domain registration at that time. We'll get into this later, but they have 1 and 2 year plans, and then of course you can put that on auto renew. You're definitely not going to want to lose a domain name once you've purchased it, especially if you're using it.
Yeah, because you've started to build up that brand on
Right.
Google, and then the value is going up as you build websites and you get all those backlinks pointing towards that domain name. If you forget to renew, that is a nightmare. And in the past, I've been using these other third-party companies to buy domains, and I'm having like every month another one's coming up, and I'm having to renew. And I probably own 30 domain names at this point.
Yes.
And I do something with one
of them.
Fstoppers.com.
That's about where I'm at too. Like I have about 20 domain names, and sometimes I'll buy domains that I might want to use down the road, and then you keep them. And I guess the wise thing would be to start pointing them all to one thing, but I haven't done anything with them as well.
Yeah.
So, it's not a bad idea to snag up domain names because they're only going to become more popular as more businesses are invented and more people want to use those same keywords. But at some point, it does get a little obnoxious where you have 30 of them and you're only using 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind, everybody is fighting over the .coms. .coms are the most valuable. Then we've got the .nets that might be the next most valuable. And then after that, we have a million of other .photo and .tech and all this stuff. So what's your opinion of those?
So I've been trying to buy a specific .com that has my name involved in it, and it's sold, and I can't get in touch with the person to try to buy it from them. So I think that I'm going to buy, I actually already have bought it, patrickhall.photography. Now, that is not as easy to remember as .com, and if you forgot and you said, oh, let me just go to a .com variant, you're going to go somewhere else. But I feel like .photography is, again, pretty clear what that is, and it's pretty easy to remember. There's a lot of them, .biz. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of them out there that are hard. Like .org, it's kind of difficult to get, but even that one you forget, are they the .com, the .net, the .org? I feel like .photography is pretty cool. I think there's a .photo if you want to do that. And according to Google, they're not going to discriminate on any of these different domain names. So when these first became available a few years ago, it was questionable if you had a .photography, maybe it would never rank higher than the .com version.
I see.
But I think now it's just based on how big your site is, how active it is, and of course all the SEO that we'll get into a little bit later.
So I think I've always been focusing on .coms exclusively. It's just what everybody knows, and I never wanted there to be any confusion. And so I hate the idea of me saying, hey, go to leemorris.photography, and then somebody tries to go to leemorris.com and it's some other website, who maybe it's some horrible website, and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know Lee has porn on his website, whatever it might be, I don't know. So I've only been focusing on the .coms. And like I said, when I first started my business 10 or 15 years ago, I wanted robertleemorris.com, wasn't available, and I looked for leemorris.com, wasn't available. But maybe 5 years ago, leemorris.com went up for auction, and it wasn't actually an auction. There are domain name auctions where there's like a set date that this is going to sell by this date, and people bid it up, and you can find that if you search online. But this was a landing page, and it said, like, make an offer on this website. And I don't remember what they were asking for at the beginning. Maybe they were asking $5,000 for it. I can't remember. But for years, every year or two, I would go back to leemorris.com and I'd make ridiculous offers. I'd be like, I'll give you $100 for this domain. And then they'd come back and be like, how about $2,000? And I'd say, I'll give you $150. How about $1,500? And finally, a year or two ago, we met somewhere in the middle, and I think I got it for $800.
Yeah.
So I have done nothing with it, like many of my domain names.
Sounds like you need a Wix website.
Yeah, maybe so. But I need to do something with that website. But basically, if you just keep an eye out for what you want, you may eventually get it. And so my idea is that when I do build this website, maybe it will have a photography component, but it's probably going to be more about me personally, just because at this point I'm not trying to get photography jobs. All of the photography jobs that we do for the most part are through Fstoppers. So I don't need to advertise myself in that way, but I might be able to just promote myself individually. I plan on writing a book and doing details like that. So it might be a good landing page for that sort of thing. But all of this being said, just keep in mind that there are ways to maybe get the domain name that you want if it's taken, but it might take patience. It might have taken me over a decade to get what I wanted.
Yeah, and now you have very little use for it.
Yeah,
It would have
bought
been more
and
useful
I don't even know what to
10
do with
years
it.
ago. Now, we're going to get more into this in the 4th video, but another thing to consider, speaking about buying all these domain names, is once you figure out the business name that you're going to use, you probably then want to go and register the Twitter account, the Instagram account, maybe the Facebook page. And in some cases, you might find that the Instagram account's already taken, even though the domain name's available. And it's very important to have a cohesive branding through everything.
That's
so
a good point.
Keep that in mind, that even if you find the domain name, especially if it's not your name, if it's some other, generic name, it may be taken on another platform. And if you want the most seamless experience, you may want to change the name until you can get something that fits all 4 or 5 of the different platforms.
That's a good point. Plus, don't forget about Gmail. Did you mention that?
Gmail
That's
as
something,
well.
yeah. Like, obviously you can have patrick@patrickhall.com. Once you build the website, you can make the email. I would imagine Wix has some system in place that you could do that. But although I own lee@rlmorrisphoto.com, I never use that email address. It's just easier for me to use Google, and I know it's less professional. I get it, but...
Or you just forward it. It's like patrick@fstoppers.com comes to my Gmail, and I read everything through that.
Yeah, so just keep that in mind. There's lots of little details here, and I feel like a lot of people just jump into a foolish business name or a foolish domain name, and then once they've already gone down this long path, they go, man, why did I name my company that? So just keep in mind, you need to check all of these different things before you decide on one business name.
Perhaps one of the most important things that I've found with coming up with your brand name is you want it to be legible, you want it to be phonically the same, so if somebody says it to you, you could spell it out correctly. And also, you might have an amazing logo designed, even if it's just in your head at this point. But when you type it into a browser, sometimes those letters, especially like L's and I's, can look very similar, and next thing you know, an L and I look like a 2, like a Roman numeral 2. I know I've gone to websites, I think even on our channel, we've critiqued websites where I will think it says something one way, and you'll think it says something a different way. And then we go to their website, and you're like, oh, we were both wrong because of the initials. Sometimes initials aren't very clear when you start putting initials without dots and stuff.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to make sure there's no way that this perfect name that you've come up with could be reinterpreted as something else.
And a big thing, like you said, you want to be able to say it to someone and they know how to write it down or remember it and write it when they get back to a computer. You think of all these cute ways to spell things incorrectly. We're going to spell photo with an F, or we're going to, everybody does this. And I feel like the only...
C's become K's, and you're like, no one's going to know.
The only way this really makes sense is if you have a super short name and you become a gigantic brand. And I'm trying to think of one offhand. Can you think of a company that's done this where they spell something? Like, I think Simply Safe, they currently do cheap home security systems.
Okay.
I think they spelled their name incorrectly, but they've... The truth is, I don't know how they spelled it, but every time I hear a Simply Safe ad, they spell it. It's like this one more step that you have to do.
Kmart. You could think it's K-A-Y or something,
But they're big enough at this point.
Where you just know that logo.
And they've made the logo all about the letter K.
Or Quick Mart or something.
Yeah, Quick Mart. A lot of times they do that with K's and W's, and Quick Set is the
key one. I get that one wrong all the time, though.
Exactly. So keep in mind, you are not one of these giant companies where every time you go to Lowe's, you're going to see Quick Set and you're going to learn, they did it with a K because they're cute. You are not that big. No one will ever know that. So if you have to tell people every time what your website is and then go, but it's spelled wrong, and they're like, what? It's quick, but you're doing a KW. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
It's just a bad decision. So try to simplify, even if it's a longer domain, but it's easier to spell, that's better.
So with all this being said, I hope that this was a really informative video on some of the things you initially need to think about when starting a brand and starting a website and getting your domain name. Many of you have already gone down this road, but you might be in need of a new website, or maybe you're looking to update your website. That's what the next video is going to be about, where we talk about what features you should have in a website itself And then of course we'll have the other videos where I build a whole brand new website. I'm really looking forward to this, especially because Wix can do some pretty cool stuff like add video features. And because I'm doing a lot more video, obviously, I've never had a site that had interactive video or anything that kind of plays in the background. So I'm excited about that. So if you want to follow along in this series and get your own Wix website, head to the link in the description below for a special offer from Wix, and you can save a little bit of money.
And the most exciting part is just that you don't have to work with a web developer anymore. It used to take months and cost thousands of dollars. Now you can do it yourself. It's so much more simple. And of course, it's exponentially cheaper as well. But stay tuned, because next week we're gonna have another episode where we continue on this how to build a website tutorial series.
Make sure you subscribe to our channel below to check out these videos. And of course, if you wanna see any of the photography content that we produce, you can head over to fstoppers.com as well as fstoppers.com/store to check out our full-length photography tutorials.